You absolutely need a Techmarine. It's the advice a Games Workshop clerk would probably give you in the 90s if you were collecting Space Marines. Things have changed, but it's nice to look back, isn't it? And in this video, that's exactly what I will be doing. Painting a metal Techmarine from 1995, having a brief look at the model's history, and answering the question, why did you need a Techmarine in 2nd edition 40k? So let's don some red armour and fire up the servo arm. I'm Matthew, this is Miniscape. Welcome! If older Warhammer models get your motor running, you've come to the right place. If you like 2nd edition 40k especially, and perhaps a touch of eccentricity, this could be the channel you're looking for. There are ways to support the channel, if that's something you'd like to do. Details in the video description, along with my Instagram details, where I post my projects regularly. So, I have this old Techmarine model which I'm going to paint up for you today, but I shall also be showing pictures of models people have sent me. Thank you, good people, for supplying those. This sculpt is one of those released in 1995 along with the Ultramarines Codex. There was another common sculpt with a bare head and holding his pocket calculator, but this one is the helmeted flavour, which makes more sense, given how smelly I have heard the 41st millennium is. This guy has what I want to call a power axe, and this rather complex belt buckle system. How odd. Before painting, I decided I wanted to have different war gear options which were easy to swap out, so I drilled some holes here and there, and filled them with these small strong magnets. As you can see, this allows me to swap the backpack for a servo arm, and to vary his ranged weapon options. In 2nd edition, Techmarines can have any pistol or basic weapon. This model has a bolt pistol for now, because it costs no additional points. But I have also given him an arm, holding whatever this whatchamacallit is. And in the future, I can add other things if I want to. It would make sense for me to capitalise on his ballistic skill of 5 by giving him a fancy weapon. Magnetising could also help with painting him in sub-assemblies. Anyway, painting begins with a spray of Sanguine Red by Colourforge, which kind of feels like cheating, but it saves me a lot of time indeed. Now, I'm not going to show you how I paint every part of the model, but instead, I will give some examples for every colour. And indeed, this is no tutorial. You're just entering into an oral contract to be swept along by the zephyrs of this madman for roughly 20 minutes. The first colour I am using is Citadel Contrast Flesh Tearers Red. Largely, I'm lining this in wherever there is an edge or recess. And boy, are there a lot of edges due to this Merlon and Krenel pattern which you may have seen on castle wall battlements. A castle is a middle-aged fortified structure still common in my country and many others. Here is an example of one of my favourites. Anyway, to aid the paint flowing into this pattern, I am applying some airbrush thinner first, and then some contrast paint. This paint then gets dragged into the recesses with less effort apparently. In the next step, I'm going to lay down all the black paint. I thin Vallejo black with airbrush thinner to improve the way it flows around, because the detail on this model is formidable, to say the least. For instance, the axe handle has many indents, and I want the paint to flow into those. I am using this image from the Ultramarines Codex as inspiration, and on this image, much of the axe is indeed black, and most of the servo arm, as well as some other gadgets adorning his armour, like his pin code secured belt buckle. Possibly he is a man of chastity, who knows, I haven't asked him, it sounds like a personal question. The Machina Opus symbol is half black and half white, in simple terms, but I base coat all the symbols like this with black, with the intention of adding a little white later. With the black done, it's time for a metallic paint. I choose aluminium Vallejo Model Air on shoulder pad rims, the boot rims, the knee rims, various cogs, and whatnot, and on the servo arm and the tip of the axe. You might be proud of me here, because I have thrown caution off the cliff and not base coated all the areas black before I paint them silver. I think the silver is opaque enough here. It's also quite bright, but that was something I toned down later. I just wanted to see what it looked like neat. Once that was out of the way, I crack out the Evil Sun's Scarlet and begin applying this in thin layers to the existing red armour. The point of this was to brighten the whole thing up. Again, I thinned it with airbrush thinner. I applied a few thin coats to get the finish I wanted, and I ensured I avoided the recesses to save me having to redo that shading. I'm not going to lie, this took me a bit of time, but I think layering can be satisfying, so I don't mind doing it. Next, we start highlighting the black components with Thunderhawk blue. This goes on the sharp edges of the servo arm, and the bolt pistol, and the many edges of the power axe. And let's not forget his chastity buckle. All of these areas are further highlighted later with some Fenrisian grey, but just on the sharpest parts to emphasise those. There's this ribbed detail on the backpack too. They get this treatment as well. Fenrisian grey is also used to paint the white half of all his AdMech-related symbols. This is the darkest shade of the white section, which will show in the recesses. I eventually layer on a mixture of Fenrisian grey and white, and then use white alone to highlight the battlement edges and the skull, focusing on the dome of the skull, the eye sockets, and the teeth. The skull on the Machina Opus symbol is of course one half white and one half black. The cog behind it is also painted in halves, but the opposite way around relative to the skull. There were a few of these symbols or variation thereof, but each of them got the same treatment. However, for the skull on the power axe, I painted this fully white, on both sides of the axe blade. Techmarines have been in the picture since Rogue Trader days. Here's one, painted by a fan of the channel. This image shows that they were considered a new release in White Dwarf issue 107. There were 6 Techmarines available, as shown by this image, plus the 2 mounted versions on bike and a jet bike. The 6 Techmarines not on a bike of some sort each had a numerical code, which is dull, so I shall call them the oil can, the wrench, the stopwatch, the blade, the spanner, and finally the lunchbox. I would like to know what was going on with their shoulders though. Anyway, enough of Rogue Trader since I know little about it. 1995 saw the release of Codex Ultramarines for 2nd edition 40k, and with it, 2 Techmarine models. This chap with no helmet, slung bolt gun, and checking his contactless card machine, and the one I am painting today with helmet and power axe. Both are metal of course, and both came with a metal servo arm backpack. They also came with the character sprue. Plastic components giving you 2 pauldrons, 2 arms, and a bolt pistol. It was things like this that gave you bits box fodder, since you didn't need every part, usually. For example, in both of these sculpts, one of the arms and shoulder pads are already moulded on. Another Techmarine was released in 1998, and shown off in White Dwarf issue 225. The model was one of 5 released in the Command Squad box set. The helmetless Marine has a power axe and an updated bolt pistol. Obviously more Techmarines have been released over the years, some operating support weapons and such, but this is beyond the scope of this video. Techmarines were essential in a Space Marine army if you wanted to take vehicles or support, other than a regular Space Marine bike squad. This was the Techmarine tax, but it could be as low as 33 points, if you were content for him to have nothing but his armour, frag grenades, and pistol. To be fair, that wouldn't be a bad list building move, but there were more interesting choices. You see, other than the likes of captains and some librarians or named fellows, Techmarines were one of the lucky few to be able to take 3 war gear cards. And why is this important? Shenanigans, that's why. Now, I do not condone such behaviour with folks other than your friends, and only if they have consented. No means no, after all. However, if you have their blessing, then taking a Techmarine tooled up to the nines could be a right laugh. For example, jump pack for a huge move, or alternatively warp jump. Give your lad a haywire grenade if you want to mess with a vehicle, or if you're feeling bold, and these haven't been banned, a vortex grenade or a virus grenade to drop amongst the throngs of enemy lines, and maybe some kind of force field for defense if you like. However, if you're a soul inclined to sobriety, then perhaps just take the servo arm, since this aligns with the lore of the Techmarine. It allows the Techmarine to be 2 crew members for a vehicle, so driver and gunner if you like. In essence, it makes him the spare crew if the crew die for some reason. Or to be able to man 2 support weapons. If this seems niche, that is because it is. However, the servo arm also gives +1 attack in close combat, so you can tool him up for that role if you fancy. In my excitement to discuss war gear, I neglected to mention his profile. He is basically a veteran Space Marine, and he only has 1 wound. He can take other kinds of armour, assault weapons, special weapons, and grenades if you like. I think a plasma gun is a good shout to capitalise on his high ballistic skill. He can ride a bike for +20 points, which is great since this is another way to get him into the enemy lines for shenanigans. A Techmarine allows for 3 servitors in your army. Or is it 5? The codex seems to contradict itself here. They aren't bought alone, but come with support weapons, so if you wanted an absolute gun line, you'll need a few Techmarines. In fact, since you're allowed 50% of the points cost to be characters, you could spend something like half your army's points on them if you like. Oh boy, that gives me an idea. Finally, in this edition, Techmarines can repair damaged vehicles or support weapons. If he is in base contact with the damaged hardware, and if he has not shot or fought in hand-to-hand combat, you can roll a d6 to see if the repairs are made. A 5 or a 6 means a single damaged hit location is put good. A 3 to 4 means it hasn't been fixed yet, but if a 4+ is rolled next turn, it is fixed, while a roll of a 3 means the same as a roll of a 1 or 2, which means the situation is hopeless, and only a litany can be said for the departing machine spirit. The wording of this is somewhat ambiguous, or maybe that's just me. Here in the table, it implies all damage is repaired in the previous turn, but above it says the damage is just for 1 location. Is it 1 location, or the whole vehicle? Similarly, can damage sustained 2 turns ago or more be repaired or not? Do let me know how you would play this in the comments. By the way, the entry for Blood Angels and Dark Angels was exactly the same in their codex, though the number of servitors issue seems to have been put right. Space Wolves, though, they didn't have Techmarines. They had Iron Priests. The main difference here seems to be that Iron Priests have a power axe as standard, and they cost 45 points instead of 33. 1 Iron Priest can be taken regardless of army size, but for every other you wish to take, the limitation is 1 per Grey Hunter squad. Iron Priests may also take servitors as a bodyguard, up to 5 models. Each servitor costs 9 points, and may be equipped with a hand flamer, a las pistol, or plasma pistol. I'm surprised these don't have some special psychology rules, but whatever, I didn't write the game. In 3rd edition, Techmarines were not independent characters, but upgrades in the command squad unit which would accompany certain HQ choices. Once upgraded, the Techmarine gained access to unique war gear, namely the servo arm for 30 points, and the signum for 15 points. The servo arm is a portable forklift truck. It counts as a separate single attack in close combat, hitting on 4+, and behaving like a power fist, i.e. being slow and attacking last. It also allows Techmarines to attempt to repair an immobilized vehicle on a d6 roll of 6 if in base contact with it. The signum is a comms device that allows the command squad to re-roll 1 miss to hit roll for shooting per turn. This was useful if the command squad had heavy or special weapons, such as las cannons or plasma guns. Unlike in 2nd edition, a Techmarine was not mandatory in order to take vehicles in your army. In the supplement chapter approved, 2nd book of the Astronomicon, optional rules were included pertaining to command squads. In the article, the author suggests that at the beginning of the battle, apothecaries or Techmarines from a command squad may be assigned to any 1 Space Marine infantry squad or bike squadron. Said character remains part of that unit for the rest of the game. This allows the squad to benefit from the character's abilities. For example, a Devastator squad benefits from being able to re-roll a missed shot, and the apothecary can patch up his brothers who are in the thick of the fight. If a character is assigned to an assault squad, then he can be given a jump pack for 10 points. If they are assigned to a bike squad, they can be given a bike for 20 points. They can even replace the gunner in an attack bike to ride into battle in style. Warpstone glow was applied to all the ribbed cables, of which there are quite a few on this model. While some of the red shows through after the first pass, it doesn't after the second. I say this, but I will be honest, it took a few goes to get this sorted, and much of the tidy-up work needed to be done off-camera. Suffice it to say, almost all of the ribbed cables were painted this way. Here I am throwing a little black wash on all the metallic areas to mute it a little. Where that didn't give me the right look, I went over it with a dark silver instead, using an equivalent of Citadel lead belcher. Notice how much of the cabling has been painted silver. I will of course paint some of these cables green and some of them yellow. However, I felt a bright silver base coat first would mean that if I missed any areas it would look metallic in the recesses, which gives the accidental effect of wear and tear. Some black lining was done around the details such as any studs and where panels overlap. This was to make the shadows more vivid. Indeed, I even used this between some of the red areas where the shadow was not stark enough. There are so many gorgeous details on this model, I feel it needs to have a black line here and there to separate out the different components, and to give them the emphasis they deserve. And here he is so far. Now, it's a shame there won't be any dark sand in this scheme. So, joke's on you, I can use it as a base before I paint a few things yellow, which is what I do on the smooth cables around his helmet, and in a few other places too. After the dark sand, I use some army paint to flickering flame on the cables, and on a couple of buttons too. Now usually when I highlight red, I use orange, but I thought I would, again, toss caution abroad and go for pinky highlights. I achieved these by mixing Evil Sun Scarlet with some white paint. Using gentle strokes, I apply this to the edges of the armour and any other components painted red. I use the smallest amount of paint in my brush to avoid blobs. A sharp point helps, but when painting the edge of a surface, I can use the flat on my brush if it is not going to interfere with anything else on the model. Now for some more subtle details. Some of the cables get yellow and others green. Flickering flame, which has a hint of orange, goes on every other cable, so they alternate between yellow and green. Here you can see I am highlighting the ridges on the cables with a bright green, an equivalent being moot green by Citadel, but mine is in older paint. This was painstaking work, and I definitely had to correct this off camera. The helmet lens was painted green as well, while the other optics were painted flat blue by Vallejo, with a white dot in one quadrant. Flashkit's yellow was used to highlight the yellow components, while dark sand was painted on the shoulder pad for reasons. Rest assured, this brush was also fixed later. Goblin green by Army Painter went onto the base, top and sides, over an Elysian green coat, which you should ignore, it was just an experiment. And when that was dry, a little bit of dark sand was dry brushed to pick out the texture. And golly, there was a lot more dark sand than expected on this baby. For the yellow pauldron, I added some orange paint to the lowest area to act as a shadow. Next, some Imperial Fist contrast was slopped on, followed by a thin glaze of Flashkit's yellow. A decal was applied over a gloss finish and conformed to the shape with Microsol. After some varnishing, that is our lad done. But wait, it looks like I painted a second Techmarine, 1 Imperial Fists and 1 Ultramarine. Joke's on you again. He can of course be both depending on the day of the week or whatever. The Imperial Fist is holding a bolt pistol, and the Ultramarine is holding something. The backpack can be a regular one or a servo arm, because a servo arm was a separate war gear card, which wasn't always needed, so I wanted to be able to pop it off and save a few points in my army list. I already have a dedicated Ultramarines Techmarine, but this chap allows me to vary his war gear. I suppose I could have magnetised the pauldron only, but that seemed terribly fiddly, and I bet there are loads of ways I could have done that, and I know you'll all have a blast putting me right in the comments. After all, Engagement is engagement. Now, I do have another Techmarine I can paint, which came in the Command Squad box set, but I shall paint that unit in another video in the future. I should also paint some servitors, since a Techmarine needs his servitor bros to be designated drivers when he has been doing a bit of boozing, or I suppose sometimes for manning the support guns in your army. Which I do have one of, to be fair. This is a heavy bolter tarantula I kit bashed a few years ago, and I'm very pleased with how that turned out. But I think that's enough about Techmarines for now. I will say that thanks to the badgering, or wolving I suppose, of many people in the comments, I have a Ragnar Blackmane model now, and I may paint him in the near future, and then I will never paint a Space Wolf again, so watch this space. And with that, I better go paint some more minis. Take care, and thanks for watching.